You're now listening to Sound Talent Media. Check out more shows at soundtalentmedia.com.
Hey, do you have an idea for a podcast but don't know where to start? Or do you have an already existing podcast that you want to take to the next level? Well, check out WeKnowPodcasting.com. From concept development to theme music to editing to logos, WeKnowPodcasting.com is a one-stop shop for all things pod. Don't hesitate to hit us up. We're very nice.
Here I am again.
In the mid-90s, the Nixons had a hit with their heartfelt single, Sister. And while they never reached the same levels of fame again, the band left an impression on Jaret Reddick of Bowling for Soup. Despite the band originating from Oklahoma City, the state of Texas embraced the band as their own, where Jaret was able to play shows with them and build a friendship with vocalist Zach Malloy. This week, we learn more about this often overlooked band with one of their biggest fans.
Invade. Miles that stand between can't separate. You're all I hoped you'd become. Sister, I see you dancing on the stage of memory. One hit is all you need to make the money guaranteed, and you can live off royalties forever.
And it makes me wonder, is it just a wonder, or is it one-hit thunder?
So, the year is 1994. Somewhere in Texas, a Gen Xer sits in a room full of blacklight posters. He pushes back his unwashed, shoulder-length hair to reveal a golden eyebrow ring. A Janine Garofalo movie plays on the TV. The man takes a hit of a dirt weed joint. He stares pensively into the void, all to the tune of Sister by the Nixons. Jaret, this is what I imagine you to be in 1994. How close am I?
I mean, it's pretty far off just because,
Okay.
I was graduated from college and starting Bowling for Soup. So you nailed the hair. My hair was really long, actually, middle on my back.
Nice.
I didn't have an eyebrow ring, and I didn't smoke pot yet.
Okay.
I still really don't, but I do sometimes, I'm kind of like one of those guys.
Yeah, gotcha. A Janine Garofalo movie on the TV, at least?
That's possible. I still find her somewhat sexy. Like, she was in something recently, and there's like just something about her and the way that she carries herself that just makes her very desirable.
Yeah, I felt like I liked her in the 90s a lot. I don't know. It's hard to explain. Anyway, that's kind of beside the point here. We're here to talk about the Nixons. And Jaret, I'm going to be honest with you. I mean, Matt's the producer, and he said, yeah, we'll do a Nixons episode. I didn't know this song. Now you, according to Wikipedia, you're kind of in this band in a way. You're listed as a backup vocalist for this band on Wikipedia. I don't know if you know that.
I didn't. So it's a fairly elaborate story. I mean, I'm happy to tell you from the beginning.
They're from Oklahoma City.
Yeah.
And, you were in Denton, and that's less than 3 hours apart. So I'd imagine that this song, Sister, was getting played on the radio, and they were coming through your way a lot more. So maybe in your area, they were a much bigger band, whereas in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, maybe they weren't hitting the radio waves as hard at the time. That could be part of it,
Yeah.
right?
So they were huge. Like, they were essentially, so like the way that Dallas has worked for years and years is like this group of bands. Then it was the Nixons and Tripping Daisy and Deep Blue Something and the Toadies.
Nice.
They all were coming up at the same time, and they all went off and did their various record deal stuff. And then it was time to hand it off to us and Flicker Stick and Edgewater and The Vanished and bands like that went on to do certain things. So at the time when this song came out, they were already, they sold out every time they played here. They were very known for their live show already. I mean, Zach, the singer, would set stuff on fire and, he'd like pour lighter fluid all over the place. And, he was kind of one of the original climbers, and would jump off stuff. And, which is funny now because Zach and I are old men together and do so many other things together. But back then, like he was the rock star of rock stars. I didn't know him. I just would watch and just like, this is crazy. And so, yeah, Sister was actually on the radio here, much like the Bitch song was on the radio here before we got signed and put it out. And then it got on the radio here again. So just sort of, yes, I was very, very aware of them. And then as that song was blowing up, it was kind of like, hey, a member of our team is out there doing it.
Right.
Yeah,
nice,
it was funny. You had picked somebody else, Queen Strike.
Queen Strike? Are you calling them Queen Strike?
He's definitely calling them Queen Strike.
Yeah. It's Queensryche. Come on,
whatever.
Man.
I can't pronounce words. But you had posted a very loving tribute to the band, the Nixons, on Facebook.
Yeah.
And they were one of those bands that I had heard of. And until I re-listened to Sister, I didn't know that I had even known this song, but I had heard about them constantly.
Yeah.
And I always remembered them being like bands that should have been bigger. Like they were always like on those types of 90s grunge bands that should have been bigger lists. So I quickly checked and I was like, oh, they're a one-hit wonder. Jared picked them. Like, why are we not talking about that?
They're definitely that band that it's the age-old story, man. It's a bummer. I mean, they're all back together now, original members, and they're playing shows and they're releasing music and all of that. And I don't think that any of them that would listen to this would disagree with what I'm about to say, but it's the age-old thing, man. I mean, they had a membership change so they changed bass players after the first album. They released a second record, major label. I believe they were an MCA. They had a moderate hit or two off that, and then they go in to make this what I feel like is their best record ever. But it's very much like could have crossed over into like the Weezer world and stuff like that. It's very pop, more poppy and stuff. And then during that time, the guitar player and the drummer left. And so Zach ends up being the only original guy with the bass player that's been there for a few years. And, it just, I think the luster of all of it, I think they sort of found themselves in an area where we found ourselves at one point where you have this great record, you lose your record deal, and it's like, what are you going to do? So the album I'm talking about is the latest thing, which we can get into when we get into the music. But yeah, man, I would say grew up watching these guys because they would come through when I was in Wichita Falls. And then obviously when we moved to Denton, we got to open up for them several times. So our relationship went from, hey, it's Bowling for Soup. Can y'all say hi to them, please? Because, our manager knows their manager kind of thing. Right. And then it became, hey, they're opening up for you guys because they can bring some people. And then it became, y'all are going to tour together. We actually had our showcases for the latest thing and us getting signed to Jive the same night in Denton, Texas, playing at Rick's. We both got signed the same night.
Wow, what a night.
And that was us going to a major label and them coming down to more of an indie label and really they were about to have to really work again, like we have the last 12 years and like they are again now. And so, yeah, that's sort of the stages of like us knowing them as a band. And then as a musician, and as a writer, Zach, the singer, Zach Malloy, who I was so terrified of back then. When we would tour with them, like I was just hung on every word because he was such a rock star. And this is embarrassing. And I don't even know if I've ever really even talked to him about this. But like, I did so many embarrassing things. But one of them, he was like, he had just had a kid. And, you know what I mean? Like I didn't have kids yet. Like I'm real into the family thing and all that. That's sort of my shit. And anyway, he's showing me these pictures of his kid, Ben. And I was just like, oh, man, that's really good. Can I have that one? And I asked him for a picture of his kid, and he actually gave it to me.
I've never heard of someone asking someone for a picture of their kid. That's pretty awesome, man. That's actually very sincere because most people who would be, seeing pictures of someone's kid would, do the polite thing like, oh, sure, that's a cute kid. But to actually ask for the picture, I bet you he remembers that forever.
I'm sure he does. We have so many. We literally text every day now. For those who don't know, Zach then went on to, after I started co-writing, after Girl the Bad Guys Want in my band, he and I have written probably 10 or 12 Bowling for Soup songs together. A lot of fan favorites. Ohio, Come Back to Texas, Two-Seater. Nice. Smoothie King, big Bowling for Soup songs. I managed him for a while as an artist, and now he just produced and co-wrote my entire country record that's coming out later this year. So I am definitely very entangled in their world.
You are the perfect person to speak on Zach and the Nixons. There is not a
For
more
sure.
qualified person to talk about this. But
Absolutely.
I want to talk about this song for a second.
Okay.
First of all, Jaret, do you have a sister or any sisters?
Yeah, my story is crazy, actually. I grew up with 4 stepsisters, but I actually recently, in the last 5 years, found my 3 biological sisters who I never knew existed because I didn't know who my dad was until about 5 or 6 years ago. And so now I have this amazing relationship with, my biological sisters. I don't really have a relationship with my stepsisters as they were kind of grown whenever I was born. So you just saw them every once in a while kind of thing.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, I definitely know the love of a sister, especially now, but I remember back then when I would hear that song, I remember being jealous. Like, this is true. I remember sort of almost trying to convince myself that he's not actually talking about a sister. He's just talking, he's talking to like just about a girl, and he's called, you know what I mean?
Right,
like
right.
you call a girl sis or something like that. Because I was kind of jealous that I didn't have that relationship with my stepsisters, back then. And the same relationship that I had with my brother, who I was very close to. So, yeah, I mean, if anybody who has a sister out there, most people that I know are very protective of them or depend on them almost like a second mom. It's a close relationship, man.
Wow. I'm an only child. I know nothing about sisters. I know Matt has a sister. Matt, you just have one sister, right?
I have 2, but
He has 2 sisters.
Yeah, the house that I'm living in, I bought off of my sister, and there was like a 4-month period where we were like roommates while she was searching for a new house. And it was great. Like, I was like, this is awesome. Like, if you have to have a roommate, your sibling isn't a bad choice.
Yeah. I feel like my older 2 kids are living this song. Like, my daughter's 18 and my son is 15, and they were always each other's security blanket growing up, much like my relationship with my brother, in that like she wanted him around when she didn't have anything else going, and then whenever she had something else going, it was like, get out of here kind of thing. And now they're best friends, and I hear them tell each other they love each other and they're there for one another, and it's a relationship that, I've said this twice now, but not unlike the relationship that I have with my own brother. But I think that there's even something more special about an older sister and a little brother, and that little brother wanting, like I said, wanting to be protective and also just sort of basking in the glow of those things that she goes out there and accomplishes and stuff. And I think that's a big part of what this song is about.
Wow. Jaret, you're in Texas.
Yeah.
And so your daughter's 18 and your son's 15. Is that what it is?
That's right.
So basically, your kids have the exact age difference and relationship as the brother and sister in Dazed and Confused.
Yeah. And not to I can't really put too much out there, but it's a very similar relationship.
Wow. Nice.
I think that there's also an element, and I don't know if this is the same for a younger brother to older sister, but like there is an element, I think, of being like the oldest in the family and having 2 younger sisters where just as like the dad probably feels responsible for this, as a brother, I feel responsible to be like, I need to treat my sister the way that any man should treat her. Like, I shouldn't raise my voice, be an asshole to her, because like people learn things for better or for worse. You know what I mean? I heard actually a really great interview with Big Show where he said like raising a daughter is really tough because you don't want to raise your voice at your daughter and then her get it in her mind that it's okay for any man to scream at her. Like
100%.
That.
I totally agree with that. And I think you're kind of right. And obviously, like, that's your relationship. I think it depends on the age difference sometimes.
Yeah.
Like my drummer Gary and his sister are only like a year and a half apart, maybe 2 years. They're super close now and have been since, they were later in their teen years. But as kids, she just picked on him and picked on him, picked on him, picked on him until one day in 8th grade, he just popped her in the chin. And he says that was the end of all of that. So I guess it sort of just depends on, like you say, the dynamic and all of that. But I think you sort of do end up settling into an area where, especially in teenage years and stuff, where you start to see, my son, for example, has seen boys disrespect my daughter. And it's an interesting thing for me to hear him talk about it because he is emotionally invested in that and is bound and determined that shit's not going to happen again, kind of thing.
That's awesome.
So yeah, I mean, that relationship is it's a special one for sure.
Now I'm sure you've talked to Zach about this song at some point. I'm sure you have. I mean, according to songmeanings.com, this song is about Zach's sister Tava, who had relocated to California to pursue a film career. And that was just around the time that the Nixons were starting to take off, getting signed, and they were seeing each other less. So he wrote this song about how he misses her and he's proud of her. What a nice story. What
it's
a nice
amazing.
Song.
And you know what's crazy is that, you know, I didn't meet her until later on in our lives. Like it's only been, I guess, 4 years ago that I finally met her. And she's now the head of the Oklahoma Film Institute or whatever. That Oklahoma is like real into the, like Albuquerque and Atlanta, like trying to get Hollywood movies to come there. So they're, you know, offering tax incentives, whatever. And it's really cool because her little brother is into music. He's a songwriter. He's, you know, now if you Google Zach Malloy, it's crazy. He has number ones with Skillet and Carrie Underwood, and it goes on and on and on. She's so cool about the music stuff. Like it's like almost Canada, you know, where it's like, hey, if you're in Oklahoma and you submit a song, you have a way better chance of us using it than anybody else on the planet. Yeah. Which is super cool. And I think that all sort of bleeds from that relationship of, like, you know, I've seen the struggles that my brother had coming out of Ada, Oklahoma, having to try to, you know, and then he moved to Norman and went to OU. And that's where they started the band. They were a cover band, just happened to kind of just start writing these rock songs. And, you know, he just has a sound about him. You know, this is a funny story, off topic, but will give you sort of like what I feel like their reach was. The first time I ever heard Matchbox 20 on the radio was that song Long Day. Okay. Been a long day. Oh yeah. If you go listen to that song and then listen to the Nixons, by the way, who came first? The Nixons. There's an element of Zach's vocal quality and tone and sort of enunciations and stuff in what Rob Thomas does. I'm not pointing the finger, but I for sure know that Matchbox 20 knew who the Nixons were before that band formed, because I know for a fact that that's true.
What is that vocal quality or that tone? Because it's not, see, here's a question I was going to ask you, Jaret. The Nixons, I mean, I dug into their catalog in preparation for this episode, and I could see calling them grunge, but they're kind of more on the tail end of that. Yeah. And I could see calling them almost like, I don't know, modern rock. I mean, that's kind of the same thing. He doesn't really have that thing in his voice, but it's also not like punk rock voice, really. Yeah. It's kind of like a clean, adult, mainstream rock voice. I don't know how to describe it.
He has that quality about him where sometimes his vowel sounds are like get caught in his cheeks, but it's not like the pickle and mouth technique, you know, like it's not like the Creed thing. It's not the, but I mean, every once in a while he does do that thing where he holds his vowels in his mouth. And I don't think it's grunge at all to me. I think it's the time that it happened and sort of like, you know, you dress like the time, right? I mean, in 94, everybody wore boots and holes in their jeans and flannel shirts. And that's what they were wearing when they were, I mean, these guys were in Guitar Magazine and they were in, you know, all of these crazy publications. I mean, they were big, and, you know, mostly Midwest. You know, they still kill, but, you know, their live album was in Milwaukee, and it's definitely something that you look back on. And I always want, because I'm the same way about the Toadies. Like, if somebody says, you know, that band, the Toadies, I'm like, of course I do, but I used to go watch them when I was a little kid. Like, how the fuck do you know who the Toadies are? And then I forget that they're enormous, you know?
Yeah, they, you know, it's so funny earlier when you were naming all those bands, like, you know, from, I guess they were all from your general area or coming through Dallas or Denton or wherever enough. It was like a who's who of one-hit wonders you were naming there. And they all had their hit. You know, we use that term on here, Jaret. That is not a derogatory term on here, because I would love to have one hit. You know, like you can have a career forever based on, you know, the residuals of having that hit. And I don't mean just money-wise. I mean just having a name for yourself.
When you guys asked me to be on this, I paused. I went and I was like, hold on, let me think about it for a second. Because I texted Zach and I go, they want me to come on this thing called One Hit Thunder and talk about your band, but I don't want you to be confused and think that I'm disrespecting you in any way, or that they are like calling you that, because obviously I don't think you're a one-hit wonder. To me, I like every song you ever written. You know, he was like, oh, no, I'm flattered. That's really cool. Thank you.
Well,
you know.
it's funny, Jaret. Just a few episodes ago, we had Scott, who was the bassist from Dishwalla, who found out about our show because he listened to us talk about Dishwalla. So then he came on and he did an episode about Tal Bachman, and he did the same thing. He reached out to Tal Bachman like, hey, no disrespect, but, you know, and Tal Bachman was like, no, it's fine. You know, I mean, I think it's cool when people realize that that's not a bad thing. You know, I think the bands and artists I talk shit on here the most, Jaret, are the ones that have a one-hit wonder, and then they're just like, a year later, they're like, oh, fuck it. Like, nobody cares about any other music. I respect the people that, like, take that one hit and build a long career. I respect the Wheatuses.
Yeah. The ultimate is Chumbawamba, right? That's the ultimate. They started that shit to make money for the Hare Krishna thing or whatever that they were doing. They put out the thing. It makes a freaking $1 billion, and they're just like, that's it. They never toured, nothing.
Yeah.
I agree. I don't think it's a derogatory thing at all. I mean, here's the thing, because I think that there's loved bands. It's like Fountains of Wayne is a great example. You know, may Adam rest in peace. But it's a great example. Stacy's Mom is a huge song for them. Obviously, we get credit for it. Still don't know the reason why. It's fucking weird. But, you know, they're a musician's band. I mean, people love them. I mean, love Fountains of Wayne.
The Bosstones. They're a one-hit wonder, technically.
Mm-hmm.
But do I think of them as a one-hit wonder? No, I think of them as a band I've listened to my whole life, and they're like a legendary, you know, for their style of music, they're one of the best ever, you know? But there's so many examples of that, just bands that we, in our world of punk and alternative, that we don't think of that way at all, but yeah, technically they are. Fountains of Wayne. Yeah, it's a perfect example.
Our great friends. I mean, Real Big Fish, Less Than Jake. I mean, they're successful bands that continue to tour and this, and they have only had one hit. That's what I was going to say. I think I find it derogatory, and this is just me being honest. I find it derogatory when someone tries to point that at Bowling for Soup because it's just not true. I mean, we've had...
Yeah, you had a couple hits, several.
Dude, several. It's like, you know, 1985... Almost, Girl the Bad Guys Want, Ohio, Emily. When We Die, it goes on and on and on. High School Never Ends. It's like these have all charted. It's like, so it doesn't happen that often, but this is funny. There was an article that came out, and I just slayed this girl, by the way. Like I fucking couldn't stand it because she was writing an article on one-hit wonders in the pop punk world, and she goes, "I know Bowling for Soup isn't a one-hit wonder, but let's face it, this is the song that most of us know from them." And then literally so basically in her own article said, we're not a one-hit wonder, but I'm still calling them a one-hit wonder. And I was like, you know?
Well, I mean, controversially, we did do an episode on Rick Springfield, who is absolutely 100% not a one-hit wonder, but like 40 years later, the one thing that we pulled up was that VH1 had to do literally listed him as like the number 6 greatest one-hit wonder and got so much angry fan mail that they had to redact it.
That's what's funny is when I think of him, I mean, because Jesse's Girl to me sits over there in its own little chair, right? And it just rocks back and forth and waits for karaoke night, right? Like it's just it. But I've done everything for you. Like that's my favorite Rick Springfield song. I was in the Rick Springfield fan club in the 6th grade, guys.
Nice. Hey, Punchline used to cover Love Is Alright Tonight.
Yes.
Such a jam.
See, what a great song. And that, you know what? That is a great, great song.
Yeah, hell yeah. I mean, Rick Springfield, that is the thing that we've had to go through those waters, Jaret, because sometimes some of these one-hit wonders, now in your case it's different. Yours were years apart, but some of these one-hit wonders, they'll have their hit, and then the follow-up, it charts, but nobody remembers it. Right. So does that count as like a second hit? Not really.
The prime example was that Sisqó's follow-up to the Thong Song actually charted higher than the Thong Song, but I'm willing to bet you could not name me what that song is.
That's a great, I mean, it's fantastic. And you know what's funny too is sometimes they chart in different areas too, because it's like 1985 was top 40. And we don't need to get into radio shit because, quite frankly, I don't even understand it anymore.
Yeah, no one does.
But Almost was a bigger hit because it was on Hot AC radio, and so technically Almost charted higher, and it's just all crazy.
Right.
I can see you from miles away.
Buying Up All Your Gray, the new EP from Pack, is now streaming on Spotify, Apple Music, and anywhere else you get your tunes. Featuring members of the Juliana Theory, Zayo, and Punchline, Pack brings decades of indie, hardcore, and alternative influence to their debut release. Limited edition screen printed vinyl available now at mindovermatterrecords.com.
Hi, podcast listeners. I'm Carol Costello, a former CNN anchor and national correspondent. This January, I'm launching a podcast about one of the first cases I ever covered as a journalist. It's one that stuck with me all of these years, the one that buried itself under my skin and stayed put. It's a true crime series about an amazing woman named Phyllis Cottle, who defied torture and death and brought a fierce rage to the quest to find her attacker. Carol Costello Presents Blind Rage is a production of Evergreen Podcasts and signature title of the Killer Podcast Network. Listen and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Discover more great true crime and paranormal programming at killerpodcast.com.
The number you have reached is 100.7 WMMS.
It wasn't just a radio station, it was a lifestyle.
Cleveland is a rock and roll city for sure.
Get down! The Wrath of the Buzzard. WMMS. Cleveland.
The rise and fall of one of the most iconic radio stations in America. Profiles. The Wrath of the Buzzard. PROH Files. Subscribe now wherever you get podcasts.
Going to back around to the Nixons. A couple things I will say. The fact that it's funny, every time I listen to this song though, Jaret, I put it on, I'm like, I don't know this song. But I swear every time I listen to it, I'm like, this is sounding more and more familiar. And I don't know if it's just because I listened to it a bunch of times in preparation, or if I did hear it on the radio and it was just locked somewhere back in my brain. But, and I'm not talking shit, there is a little bit of an element of the melody that reminds me of Pearl Jam Black in the verse melody. There's a little bit of that. She's an empty canvas. There's a little bit of that. I'm not saying it's like a ripoff, but there is something about that melody that reminds me. I'm sure that I'm not the first person to say that. Do you hear that now that I say
hear
that?
what you're saying right now. I'm wondering which was written first.
Pearl Jam, that song's from 1991. Black. That was on 10.
I wonder when the Nixons album with this on it the first time came out.
Oh, I don't know. I don't know about that.
Because they put out an album in 90 and then an EP in 92. So it's not unreasonable to just imagine that two different bands came up with a very similar melody line simultaneously.
Or Pearl Jam were in the Matchbox 20 Club and they just liked the Nixons.
Yeah. I do remember this very memorable CD cover from like the BMG and the Columbia House ads. It has the little girl with the blindfold and like the flames behind her. I remember that album cover, that being FOMA. I remember that being in those things. So it's not that I completely, but dude, another thing about this is, so this album is from 1994. Dude, what a year of competition. I'm talking on every level, from music to movies. I mean, dude, 1994, I bring this up so much, but the movies that came out in 1994, Pulp Fiction, Forrest Gump, Dazed and Confused, Shawshank Redemption. It's just like the most powerhouse year of movies. And then music, I mean, 94 is, I think it was recorded, maybe released in 93, but really got big in 94. It was Green Day, Dookie, 9 Inch Nails, Downward Spiral, Soundgarden, Super Unknown.
Weezer, self-titled.
Offspring, Rancid.
Dude.
I mean, it just goes on and on. That year was crazy. And another one, the Toadies, Rubberneck.
Yeah. I mean, Beck Loser was huge this year. I know, but Punchline did an EP of songs from 94, and we couldn't even, it was hard to even narrow it down to 4, you know, like there's a lot of competition. I mean, Jim Blossoms at this time, like, so, you know, some of those massive hits were coming out, and just, there's a lot of explanation for why I may have not been that familiar with this song. But, you know, and I dug in, and just like you were saying, Jaret, this is pre, what's their names? Who's the one that ruined Pyro for everybody?
Great White.
Yeah, this is pre-Great White. Yeah, I was seeing, him light. I was like, does he really light these fires on the stage? Because there was a music video of them doing that, and I was like, whoa.
He would just have a can of lighter fluid. I mean, it would so never happen.
So
now.
dangerous. It's
Back
so
then,
bad.
it was like he'd set his guitar on fire and swing it around, and I mean, it was cool. It was, you just were like, Jesus Christ, this is crazy.
Right. Jaret, maybe you can explain this to us, because obviously Chris and I are just two dudes from PA, but every time I feel like we cover a band from Texas, be it the Toadies, the Nixons, or the Butthole Surfers, they are known for crazy stage shows. What is going on in the state of Texas?
Everything's bigger in Texas, including the show.
Not the Toadies, really. They just kind of stand there. Dude, I think we just all just used to try to one-up each other, and that's sort of like where you just, what could possibly happen. Again, in the 90s, I stuck a beer bottle up Chris's ass during a show one time. Like, you can't do that anymore. Those are the kinds of things.
Not.
Those are the things you did, And look, I'm proud of my city, much like most people are. I hold the music here very, very dear. I think that we've produced some amazing stuff, and it's one of those things where, as I look back on it, it's fun to be able to do that, to rattle off like, oh, and this and this and this, and 2 years before that was Edie Brickell and the New Bohemians.
Nice.
And, there's this, just kind of keeps going.
And when you're talking about this, Jaret, are you saying Dallas? Is that what you consider, like how I consider Pittsburgh, but even though I live 45 minutes from there? Or are you saying Denton? Or you're saying Dallas, right?
I'm saying Dallas because Dallas is huge. I mean, it's geographically, I think it's a 6-hour drive across the thing. Like it's massive. So
right.
We even sort of, Fort Worth, Dallas, Denton, like it's called DFW. And Denton definitely had its scene. Dallas had its scene, but it was all sort of intermingled. And again, the Nixons were kind of just adopted here because they were from Oklahoma, but they came down here and they made this a home and hired management here and lived here. And much like us, I mean, we're from Wichita Falls, but after we started the band, we moved down to Denton, and Denton just embraced us. And, now when you go to some city websites, it'll be like things from Denton and it's Bowling for Soup. And feels good when a city does that. And so I think we're all really good. Like there's pages on Facebook where all the Dallas musicians are all in there and it's such a cool community. Nice. I think there were times when maybe, again, everything went in stages, right? So we looked up to Tripping Daisy, the Nixons, Deep Blue Something, all of those bands. Never would have said an ill word. Then as we're coming up with the next round, sometimes there was a little competition, but all of that goes out the window as soon as you all have kids and a mortgage, like it is what it is.
Yeah, it's cool. Like I've experienced that, Pittsburgh's not some huge music city. It's like when you're planning a tour, Jaret, what do you consider Pittsburgh? A B market, a C market? Like how we have these like terms or whatever, but I mean, you guys do really well in Pittsburgh. It's very much a sports town, as you know, but music, it's been, we've done well here, but Anti-Flag and Juliana Theory as far as our style of music. And then it's like Wiz Khalifa and Mac Miller. And then
Rusted Root and
Donnie Iris are like, that's kind of it.
We're playing there in September and there's a Steelers game that day. So I'm going to the Steelers game the day of the show. So I make no promises on my performance for that night. So.
Yeah, you're going to be wound up. The other thing I was going to say about the Nixons, I checked out some of their newer music. I like this song they had called Crutch.
Yeah.
Pretty rockin'. I thought it was cool that they, you could tend to, in the later part of your career, rock less, try to appeal to like an older crowd or something. And it sounds kind of like they're rocking more than anything else that I heard. So I thought that was pretty cool.
They just have a really good vibe. Again, when they broke up, it was bad. Zach tried to keep the band going with the second Ricky, who the second Ricky bass player was. So the original band is Ricky Brooks, and then Jesse John, who is the drummer for Seether still. He went on to be, and he's like in the band and has been the whole time. And Zach, and then when John and Jesse left, before the latest thing even came out, Zach trying to just make it work. But so it wasn't a good breakup. I mean, it was a breakup of friends and college roommates and all this. And so some of them didn't speak for many, many, many years. And there were some wounds that had to be patched up in order to make it even happen again. And if I'm not mistaken, they came back together for some event in Oklahoma City and just realized, I think a bunch of hatchets got buried and and as they started enjoying it again. And, Zach, I think, had been writing so much country for so long and had just started writing a lot of rock stuff for Godsmack and, like I said, Skillet. And I'm bad at these lists, but it's crazy, his arsenal.
It was the ones that I saw were Carrie Underwood, Skillet, Our Lady Peace, and Bowling for Soup were like the names that popped up on his wiki.
Those are probably, it's nice to be in that group. But, I think he was ready to write some songs for him and to get out there and perform again. So when you see them, it's cool because, he's not lighting stuff on fire, jumping off stuff anymore. But, there's definitely the feeling of like, Jesus Christ, these guys fucking rock, and I agree with you on Crutch, man. I think, when somebody puts a comeback song out there, it could, a lot of times your fans really don't give a shit, but man, it's definitely one to listen to.
Nice. Jared, at the end of these episodes, we go around and we say, did this artist bring the one-hit thunder, or was it a one-hit blunder? And we know you're giving it to Thunder. This is your boy. There's not one thing you've said that would it'd be really funny if all of a sudden you're like, you know what, this is a blunder. But I'm gonna assume you're going Thunder. I mean, we've talked a lot. You've convinced me the only reason, and blunder is a hard word, but as far as the charts go, as far as calling this a hit, it peaked at number 48 on whatever, the Billboard Top 200, and number 6 on the mainstream rock chart.
Right.
My only problem with it is kind of the
I mean, not to cut you off, but, it was on MTV, I mean, put that in at least into consideration. Right. And I'm not, you this is your show, you grade it however you want, but dude, it's on MTV. I mean, at number 6 at the time, you just read off its competition. Right. Number 6 on rock radio at the time. Are you kidding me? Like,
good point.
Alice in Chains was still putting out music, for Christ's sake.
Good point. You sold me. I was going to give him the Thunder either way. That was my only holdback. Was I guess questioning, was this a hit? Maybe they're just a band with a strong following and a dude that's a great songwriter, but maybe not a one-hit wonder because this doesn't count as a hit. That was my only thought. But you've convinced me. If they were on if they were on MTV in 1994 with all that competition, like you said, I can't say anything about that. I'll give them the Thunder pass. And on top of that, part of it is more of their catalog and the fact that the song I liked most from them was a recent song. I think that I'll give them the Thunder pass there. Matt?
I mean, I'm going to give him Thunder as well, but I want to address. Jared brings up a really great point because the MTV factor is such an interesting one because, now the way they do Billboard stuff, they do take into point like how many people are watching it on YouTube, how many people are streaming it on this service and this service to like calculate that stuff. And for the 90s, I definitely don't think they were factoring in how often was the video played on MTV in their rankings. And that is an interesting factor that I think in the future we also have to keep in mind was like, how big was the video though? Because when you're talking about videos, like Blur is the example I'm going to bring up. Yeah, Song 2 is the song everyone knows, but I think the video by Blur that everyone remembers is Coffee and TV with the little milk carton walking around trying to find the boy on the front of him. Like the more interesting and memorable the video, the more it was going to get played, regardless on if the song was a mega
but that was
hit.
going to result in album sales at that time, Matt. Those two things are probably pretty correlated. Not to disagree, really.
It's worth it, but I also just want to give a quick shout out. One of the more interesting things with this band is based on the success of this song, even if it was a quote unquote minor hit, allowed them to go on tour with the Toadies, Kiss, Seven Dust, Slash's Snake Pit, Soul Asylum, and fucking Radiohead. So like, talk about taking your one hit to play with like some of the greatest musicians of the 80s and 90s.
And that was a real like wide spectrum of different types of bands. I mean, it toured with Kiss, but also Radiohead. Like that's pretty impressive. I got to give them credit for that too.
Yeah, and honestly, again, to me, their strongest album was called The Latest Thing, and it actually came out on Koch Records. And it's not easy to find, but if you can find it, to all listeners, please do this now. Go try and find the video for the song called Blackout by the Nixons, and Chris Burney makes an appearance and
Nice.
in his tutu that many of you may have saw on tour back in the day.
Nice. Hey, Jaret, but before we close up here, do you have anything going on that you want to let the listeners know about in the world of Jaret or Bowling for Soup or anything? You got your hands in a lot of things, man.
A lot of things going on. Well, you can find everything, all of my bands and all of my podcasts at jaretreddick.com. But yes, Bowling for Soup coming up. We got four shows up there in Atlantic City and Pittsburgh, Harrisburg, and some other town. New album coming out in the fall, in the spring. I'm going to be releasing a new country record coming up in the fall. We'll be on Bowling for Soup on Rock Boat this year. You can see me on stage it pretty much once a week right now. And all my podcasts, Rockstar Dad Show, Jaret Goes to the Movies, Bowling for Soup, fan page Rampage. And it just keeps going. So just go to jaretreddick.com and click on all the links.
jaretreddick.com. He's doing literally everything, which is the way to be. It's the way to be.
Stopped doing a few things. It's funny. If COVID made me realize anything, it's just that I was burning it at both ends too much, because I was still not seeing my kid, for a few weeks. And I was just like, that's ridiculous. I'm not even leaving the house. Like, this is nuts. So I stopped managing bands and I stopped producing outside of my own stuff and stopped writing for other bands unless I know them. And, a few things like that where I had to downsize a smidge. So the list that I just gave you is the short list now.
And it's still pretty long too, but
a lot going on.
Thanks so much for coming on, Jaret. This is fun.
Thank you for having me, guys, man. Chris, it's always a pleasure. Matt,
oh yeah, man.
It's been nice to get to know you, and I'm looking forward to have me back anytime, man. I could talk for hours about anything.
Nice. Me too.
I look at you and see the life I wanna live. You look at me and say, how could it come to this? But if the timing's right and the stars.
This has been One Hit Thunder. One Hit Thunder is hosted by Chris Fafalios of Punchline, Pack, and Another Cheetah, and produced by Matt Kelly of Geekscape.net. Underneath me, you're hearing No Significant Other off the Punchline album Delightfully Pleased. Visit punchlion.com for merch, new music, and upcoming shows. If you have any interest in podcasting, visit weknowpodcasting.com for how Chris and I can make your show sound as professional as possible. Let us know your thoughts on the show by emailing us at onehitthunderpodcast@gmail.com, and make sure to rate, review, and subscribe to us on your favorite podcasting app. Tune in next week for another episode of One Hit Thunder.
The door, but someday you'll call this home.
You're listening to the Geekscape Network.
The number you have reached is 100.7 WMMS.
It wasn't just a radio station, it was a lifestyle.
Cleveland is a rock and roll city for sure.
Get down! The Wrath of the Buzzard. WMMS. Cleveland.
The rise and fall of one of the most iconic radio stations in America. Profiles, The Wrath of the Buzzard, PROH Files. Subscribe now wherever you get podcasts.
Hi, this is Krista Makes, host of Krista Makes a Podcast. The theme of the podcast is songwriting. Each week, my musical guest picks a defining song from their career to discuss, critique, and analyze during the show. So please join me for some fun and insight into some of the greatest songs ever written and recorded. Listen and subscribe at soundtalentmedia.com.